So what is music actually worth in today's new music economy? This is something a lot of musicians are arguing about and fighting about online, is what artists should be paid, what the payout for streams should be, and all this different kind of stuff. But today, I'm going to give you the definitive breakdown as to why music is valued at what it is and what we can do as independent artists to combat this. So I want to break it down into groups of threes here. Music has three levels of value. It has intrinsic value. I think just creating the art itself has value. I think it has economic value. You can make money from music, technically. And then number three, it has cultural value. Music can shape and form culture. And so certain pieces of art are held up as cultural, like icons. Think of the Mona Lisa in France, for example. So music has these three levels of value: intrinsic value, economic, and cultural. But I want to focus on the economic today because if you think about it, this is a music business channel, and that's what's directly affecting a lot of artists nowadays, is the economic impact and the economic shift that's happened in the past 10, 15 years in the music business that people are still trying to play catch up to. So let's dive into the economic value of this, shall we? The biggest streaming service provider right now is Spotify, and they're also the one that gets put under the most fire and the most criticism, which I understand because the payouts are so bad. But let's dive into this for a second. If we took all of Spotify's different tiers of prices they offer and we average them out, okay, it would be $11.24. That's not that much higher than the basic ad. Free. They have a free level, and I think they have a level where it's cheap, and then there's family plans and stuff. It all averages out to about $11.24, right? So if we take that number and we think about it from three different angles, okay, this is where it's going to get really interesting to me. So number one, we have to look at it from the listener, the fan's perspective, okay? Because if we don't understand how they're viewing the situation, how can we have a clear view on what to do about it in our music business? So how are fans looking at this? Well, to them, they're paying roughly $11.24 a month to get access to 100 million songs. You heard me correctly. There's roughly 100 million songs on Spotify. So when someone pays $11.24 to get access to 100 million songs, what does that turn the per song value into? Are you ready? It turns it into 0.0000001124. That's not a lot of money, right? Now, but think about this for a second. This should hopefully outline to you this gap in value that is seen between the fans, the people who are consuming the music, and the people who write the music, the artists, the ones who are creating it. There's a huge gap here in terms of valuation of this song. For the consumer, they're paying $11.24, or roughly speaking, they're paying every artist that has stream. Now they've changed the rules on Spotify where if you don't have 1,000 streams, you won't get paid for the royalties on that song until it reaches 1,000 streams, which remember is roughly, $4. So just keep that in mind before everyone gets all, whatever. So take that out of the equation, right? Think about it. They have just gotten access to a near infinite catalog of music. They'll never be able to listen to all that music in their lifetime. And they only paid $11 for it. Where, as an artist, we don't look at it that way. We look at it from a completely different perspective because we're the ones that created the art, right? We're the ones that are putting all the blood, sweat, and tears to create the thing and get it out there. Now, we're going to get to artist perspective, but I want to talk more in depth about this because, yes, listeners are going to view this a specific way, and we have to really pay attention to that because we can demand as artists all day long people should pay X, Y, and Z for music, but unless listeners and fans are not willing to pay that, they will not pay that. And their consuming habits have been shifted. Yes, there was a point in time where people were used to paying for music like they pay for any other commodity. They would have to go buy the music to get the music, right? Now they don't have to do that. They've been given access versus ownership. And people will pay less money for access to something. Think about YouTube. You have access to all these millions of videos for free, right? So there's this infinite access to everything at all times genie that has sort of been let out of the bottle. And you're not going to be able to put that genie back in, because people are now used to a world, and have been used to it for about 10 or more years now, where they have on-demand access to near infinite amounts of information, music, whatever it happens to be. So we can complain about that all we want, but if we really think about it, what's smarter? To yell at the fans for not paying us more money, which can come off kind of weird if you if you hear, just listen to that for a second. Or you can think about it like, okay, how can we view this situation from a higher view so we really know what to do? Because you think like, okay, so how do the artists feel about it? Well, hold on one second. There's a big middleman in the way here that we need to address. So think about Spotify for a moment. I want you to, I know as an artist, this is going to seem sacrilegious, but I want you to view everything from Spotify's perspective for a moment. I know. So if you look at what it takes to run Spotify as a business, it costs billions of dollars with a B. And I'm sorry I popped that B like it was a birthday balloon, but that's a lot of money. In fact, I was doing some like chat with ChatGPT, and I was like digging into the numbers about it, and we roughly came up to $19.9 billion in expenses if you include all the operational expenses, if you include all the marketing, the royalties, and everything. It's about $19.9 billion that they have to pay to operate Spotify. That's a lot of money, but you may be thinking, well, Dax, they probably make billions, and you're correct. They make roughly 12 billion. So wait a minute. Do we see a problem here? Yeah. They have more expenses than they have revenue. Well, that seems to be a problem, doesn't it? Yeah, it's a huge problem. See, this is why, for a large reason here, artists are in this predicament, is that distributors have set a bar that even they cannot uphold anymore. Spotify has had issues with its profitability for years. This is not a new thing, guys. That's the reason prices continue to go up for their subscription, is because they are having trouble paying off their expenses. And I know businesses, you may be thinking, how is it not in bankruptcy? Well, a lot of these businesses will leverage banks and other kinds of lenders to access funds so that they can keep the business alive. Now, they're betting that they're going to eventually get profitable, but I don't want to dive too much down that rabbit hole. The main thing that we need to take away from this is that they're not in a good situation, and here's one of the reasons why. If you think about it, yes, we talk about 0.0035 cents per stream, but that's for independent artists. Did you know there's a different royalty payout for major label artists? Why? Because major labels will go and buy stock in a company like Spotify. And so they have, as shareholder, as the whole corporate structure works with shareholders, they have kind of a say in how the business goes, right? And then they're bringing their artists to the table, and they're negotiating higher royalty payouts. So instead of getting 0.0035, a major label artist may get 0.005 or more per stream. So that's something that needs to be taken into consideration. Bigger artists are getting paid more per stream than independent artists because they have an unfair access basically to the inside corporate structure of Spotify. So the middlemen of middleman labels are gerrymandering and tweaking with the system inside Spotify. Because here's the thing, if Spotify was able to pay every single artist, major label or independent, the same flat rate royalty rate, I think you might be in a better position. Because when you have that sort of exponential royalty payout, what do I mean by that? What I mean is that, okay, yeah, the smaller artists we're going to be paying them out smaller chunks of money, but the bigger artists, we're going to be paying not just a little bit more because they're bigger, but exponentially more because we have to pay them more per stream. So it's one thing if you have to pay out a lot of the big artists because they take up a majority of the streams. That's just meritocracy. That makes sense. They're the ones with the most views and the most attention, and they're getting it. I understand. They've won the marketing game. But now they're being paid more for the streams than the independents are because of this gerrymandering in the system that labels have done. So, as a common theme through my channel, I don't like labels. because they do things like this, because they're very upset that the industry was the rug was pulled out from underneath them, and their monopoly that they had on pretty much every aspect of the business is now, it's been more decentralized than it used to be. And they don't like that, so they're trying to gerrymander the system. But what we need to focus on is the idea here of, one, if we can figure out a way to get labels out of this distribution game, because fundamentally, they're just venture capital, right? That's all labels are to artists now. Because if you don't have your business set up, they won't even look at you. So thank goodness you're on this channel watching these tips, because most artists just think, yeah, I'm gonna get signed with a label. I'm like, dude, they won't even look at you unless you've got a sustainable business to invest in. They're basically like the sharks in Shark Tank. So we need to figure out how to circumvent these things. But this gives us a little bit more of a perspective, is why is Spotify not profitable? Well, one of the reasons is that they're I don't want to say being held hostage. That's not really the quite right way to look at it, but there's a lot of manipulation going on within their own system, because labels are sort of like a parasite that have snuck into the body of Spotify and are figuring out how to pull out extra money that isn't going to other artists for no other reason than they have a connection. So we can understand now from two perspectives, why is the value economically of art been pushed down so far? Well, one, because Spotify created a model that they couldn't really sustain. And then on top of that, labels have came in and made it even more unsustainable, because they have to exponentially pay out more of their big artists than they do their smaller independent artists. And listeners are now conditioned and used to paying for music for $11.24 and getting access, not ownership, but access to all this music. Now, there is a difference in access and ownership. You can leverage that as an artist yourself, but hopefully now you guys are starting to see a little bit clearly as, okay, music is being devalued from the supply and demand front, from the listener side. It's also being devalued from the gerrymandering of the labels and the distributors. And when I say distributors, I don't mean like TuneCore and things like that. I mean Spotify, Apple Music, the digital service providers, I should say that, the digital service platforms. Digital streaming platforms. There we go. That's the right one. Okay, the last perspective that we need to look at, the three angles, right, is from the artist's perspective, your and I's perspective. So we're looking at this like, okay, I'm going to a distributor like TuneCore, DistroKid, whoever, and I'm paying them $36 a year, roughly speaking. If you get their average plan, I think it's roughly around $36 a year. Okay, that's what we're paying every year. But what do we get in return? Okay, we get 0.0035 cents a stream, most of us. If you're not in a big label that's negotiated a higher payout, you're most likely getting paid 0.0035 cents a stream. Okay, well that's a problem, because even if you're like putting out advertising as an independent artist, that's not a sustainable royalty payout until you hit a certain level of volume. And so it requires artists to invest a lot up front into these ad campaigns that may potentially not bring back a return. That I recommend clients cutting off the budget at a certain point if you don't see it start to perform at a certain level, because save your money. It would suck to invest more money to not get the result, right? So, don't let it get too far. Don't spend $500 a grand on a campaign when you know it really wasn't performing where it should have been after the first $100, so we have to look at that. But it became unsustainable for us to actually have, drive ads to Spotify and get the streaming royalty income, and that would sort of pay for the ads. You have to get to a point where you've got like tens of thousands of people who have come to your Spotify as a result of your ads, and they're listening to not just one song one time and then bouncing, but they're listening to a good chunk of your catalog and doing that on a regular basis. After a certain period and after a certain volume, that can start to make sense, but it's made it way tougher for artists. That's just a little side note. But how has music been devalued from our perspective? Well, here's the unfortunate reality. Because of the previous two circumstances that I just described, because I described how listeners are paying so little for so much access, and companies like Spotify aren't even really able to be profitable due to all their expenses and the gerrymandering from the labels, we're in an awkward position because we want our music to have more economic value, but we understand the position that we're in right now where the economics are not in our favor. The supply and demand is not in our favor. So what do we do about this? In my opinion, we have to look at it from the perspective of per stream income is not going to be what's going to make us successful in this music business. We're not going to be able to live off our royalty income alone. To me, some people are not going to like this analogy. They're really not. I can already see the comments in my head. It's kind of like a get-rich-quick mentality for musicians. I know, it's kind of like a get-rich-quick mentality that I'm just going to write a song, I'm going to drop it on Spotify, it's going to get a whole bunch of streams, and I'm going to be a millionaire, and I never had to go to work ever. That to me sounds like a get-rich-quick scheme, because it sounds like get a whole bunch in return and do hardly nothing. Where the more logical thing would be, hey, I need to actually take effort to get my music out there and to do this. So we're in a position where our music, we want it to have more economic value, but it's also been devalued. You've heard me say this in previous videos. Music is now your marketing. And marketing is something you give out for free. And as artists, we kind of helped perpetuate this supply and demand problem by uploading our music in mass waves to Spotify. Now, it was kind of one of those situations where if there's a majority of the people that are streaming music are on Spotify. If your music's not on Spotify, you're instantly putting yourself at a disadvantage. But if you put yourself on Spotify, you are instantly now giving away your music for 0.0035 cents a stream. We're kind of put between a rock and a hard place there a little bit. And so that's a tricky situation. And so while it's not ideal, here's what we can do. Until some major changes start happening in the infrastructure of how the industry operates, we need to figure out how to adapt. And ultimately, what we're going to adapt to is something we would have already been doing if we were successful. But a lot of people like to push this work off because they have a get-rich-quick scheme mentality of, I'm going to make music and I'm going to be making $10,000 a month for my music just like that. Instead of, let me go out and build a music business, which is what all the most wealthy, successful musicians have done. If you look at a majority of the most successful musicians, they have figured out how to leverage their music and their brand into selling other things. And that doesn't make them any less of an artist than anyone else, right? They're just the people that understood the game and were able to operate it. Prince was telling us this in the 80s. But, it's taken us to now to have the technology and the independence and the decentralization for artists to be able to do this. So here's what I want you to look at. And as far as in this discrepancy here, we value music because of the royalty payout. Even then, I want you to think about, there's been this number gap that's been existing through this video now that maybe some of you have noticed, but I want to point it out now, which is if we're getting paid 0.0035 cents a stream and the consumer only views it in the value of 0.0000001124, that's a big gap, which means Spotify is actually paying us what was the number? 31,139 times more value-wise. We view the value of a stream 31,000 times higher than a consumer does. So literally, that is a numerical equation or statistic, you could say, that is showing you how big the gap in perception of value it is from a fan to an artist. It's a huge gap, y'all. It's a crazy gap. And that's been the issue for a lot of us, is not understanding this perceived gap, because even with the royalty payouts we're getting, we still view it so much higher than the consumers that they don't really understand our plight quite to they understand, but they understand from the place that someone who's sitting on the couch watching the commercial about help the needy kids in Africa, they feel bad in that kind of way. They're watching the video and they're like, oh, that sucks. You guys are only getting paid 0.0035 cents a stream. Oh, that sucks, man. I wish that was better for y'all. But then if you turned it around and you said, oh, would you be willing to pay $24 a month for Spotify so I can double my royalty rate? They say, no. I don't even like paying what I pay now for it. I feel like it's too high. So no, I'm not going to change that. So that's what I mean when I say they care, but they don't care in the sense that they're willing to do something about it. They care enough like they're going to feel empathetic for you, but are they going to start paying more for Spotify? Probably not. But what would they pay more for? Well, they would pay more for offers. They would pay more for offers that you create as an independent artist that they find valuable. So here's the trick that everyone's kind of figured out, is that if you can use your music to go out and do what music is supposed to do, which is connect with people and unite people, you can get that music out there, right? So the music is doing what the music's supposed to do by being your marketing. And then once people are in sort of a, we'll call it a group or a tribe or a community that you got your audience, your fan base here in front of you. Now you can say, hey guys, do you want to help support more music coming out? Well, here's a t-shirt, here's a hat, here's a wristband, here's a VIP ticket, here's an opportunity to do a one-on-one vocal lesson with me, here's a way for me to collaborate on your song, here's a way for me to produce your next single, here's a way for, you see what I'm saying? If you can start figuring out ways to create things of value for your audience, now you can start to monetize your music business. And what's beautiful is the music will do the marketing to get the fans. The fans will now hopefully support you financially by getting a hat, t-shirt, wristband, whatever it happens to be, sticker, right? Now they're financially invested in the band or the artist, I should say. And by doing that, we're kind of getting people into this, like moving them down the funnel, right? The marketing funnel. And we're bringing them closer to people who would be willing to support us again. Hey, I have another thing. And now you have this reliable group of people that you've identified in the mass crowd of your audience that you've attracted that are willing to support you financially. And you know what they actually want to purchase because maybe you've done like a survey or an ask campaign or something like that. This is something that artists very rarely think about because they're so focused on the new music economy and how it's different and how artists aren't paid as much. But what they don't talk about in the old days, what they don't talk about, they glamorize, yeah, artists could sell CDs for $17 a pop and they would be millionaires. Yeah, they glamorize that. But what they don't glamorize is the labels taking a majority of that money. Labels having control over things you have to do at all times, and managers and all these different people reaching their hand in their pockets and also controlling you at the same time because you signed a contract that you didn't fully understand. And a lot of that stuff has led to a lot of incidents and bad, terrible Hollywood stories that we read about where people fall into terrible traps because of this business. And a lot of it happens in those higher up manipulative label situations. So I hate to see artists, lamenting about the current state of the world they're in when really the romanticized world they wish they lived in was not as rosy as it appears in the stories, So I hope you guys understand that you actually right now live in the best time to do this. You live in a time where it's decentralized enough to where you can determine what your marketing looks like. You can determine who you actually want to interview, what brands you want to work with. You have creative control in pretty much every aspect of your business. And if you can just learn the skills of becoming more like an entrepreneur, you're going to set yourself apart from 99% of the other artists that are out there. So I hope you guys have understood a little bit deeper, on a deeper level, why music is valued, what it is. And if you'd like some help setting up your music business, monetizing it, we have an application in the description. If that's something you're interested in, you can check that out. And if you did enjoy this video, you got some value from it, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, the notification bell, all that good YouTube-y stuff. I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments, so hit that up. Let me hear what you guys have to think about this sort of idea as to where music is valued at and what would you guys do about it. I've heard some people recommend strikes and all different kinds of things, so I'd love to hear about that. And I look forward to seeing you guys on another Musicians Ignite. Take care.